Hello everyone and welcome back to Almost There, a Twisted Tale novel here on Disney Magic Zach. We are on episode 28, chapter 27. Let's get into it. By the time Tiana returned to the dock, Lewis and Charlotte had already climbed aboard the boat, but Naveen was nowhere to be found. Tiana briefly wondered if he'd decided against joining them, but a moment later he came running along the pier. "Here we are," he said, holding 3 fat beeswax candles to his chest. "I've heard the bayou can get murky, even during daylight hours." Thankfully, there was someone selling these in the market. Tiana was touched by his thoughtfulness, despite the impracticality of his suggestion. She reached into her bag and pulled out her kerosene lamp. "I'm way ahead of you, though we could use those as a backup if necessary." "You think of everything, don't you?" he said. Tiana couldn't tell if he was joking, so she just nodded. "Are we ready?" "Ready," Lewis called. "Hey, Tiana, you need me to help you guide you to Mama Rhoda's?" Tiana hesitated. Lou was not the greatest at directions. Still, he'd grown up in these bayous, and she supposed having him here to help was better than relying on her memory alone. "Start out that way," the fisherman chimed in, pointing east. "A few knots down, you'll see the entrance to the canal. That'll take you to the Bayou Bienvenue. That's the quickest route to Mercia, Maxon, and all the others." Tana had no idea exactly on which bayou Mama Rhodey's house was located. She'd have to rely on her recollection of landmarks, and on Lewis. And prayer. Lots and lots of prayer. "Thank you," she told the fisherman, as he untied the last of the rope from the stout, algae-covered pole and gave their boat a firm push with his booted foot. He tipped his hat to them again, and they started to drift out onto the scummy water. China grabbed hold of the long handle that stuck out from the motor, holding it steady as they travelled along the busy river. She kept the boat close to the bank to avoid the wake from any of the larger vessels. The waves that created made the grassy film covering the water resemble short, rolling hills. After about 10 minutes, she spotted the turn the fisherman had told them about. The fog, which was thicker on the water, made it difficult to see. Fortunately, as they travelled further away from the city, it began to let up, and she could see more than 2 feet ahead of the boat. China could sense that they were getting closer by the odours lingering in the air. The briny aroma of the river mixed with the dank, vegetative smell of the murky bayou instantly brought back memories of the last time she had been here. She firmly shut those thoughts down out of her head. It was bad enough that she had to share this tiny boat with Naveen. She would not torture herself by reminiscing about the time they'd spent together, falling for each other. "Oh, this takes me back to when I was little," Lewis said. "Really? I didn't know there were bayous in Shreveport," Charlotte said. China caught a glance at Lewis and shook her head. Lewis' family is originally from the bayous west of here," she said to Lottie. "Yeah, I grew up in parts like this," Lewis added. "Once you live here, it never leaves your blood." "What made you come to New Orleans?" Charlotte asked. Charlotte looked back at Lewis. When she'd made the deal with the Shadow Man to allow Lewis to become human, the two of them had sketched out a story about how Lewis had moved from North Louisiana in search of fun and excitement in the big city. It wasn't far off from the truth. She had hoped Lewis didn't say anything that would rouse suspicion. Lewis gave Lottie a line about wanting to play jazz in the spot where the musical style was born, which seemed to satisfy her. China breathed a sigh of relief and prayed that the subject wouldn't come up again. She'd have a hard time enough explaining to Mama Rhoda once they arrived at her boathouse, and she didn't have the energy to come up with another story about Lewis's dubious origins. The body of water that they were tapered in a much narrower canal. Large, spindly tree branches hung overhead, with gossamer thin moss draping from them like a lady's fine hair. China looked upwards, squinting to see through the hovering fog. She couldn't be sure, but she thought this might be the place where she and Naveen had first fallen out of the sky onto the fated balloon ride they'd taken a year before. She looked from side to side, keeping an eye out for the hollowed tree stump where they'd hidden away from that pack of gators. A small smile tipped at one corner of her mouth, and she remembered the first night, and how ridiculously out of his element Naveen had been. She glanced over at him now, taking in his strong and handsome profile. He'd changed so much in the year since she'd first met him. He was no longer the spoilt little rich boy who thought he could get by on his looks and charm, though he'd surely won her over with that charm in the end. "Do you want to share what you find so amusing, Miss Tiana?" Tiana startled. "Huh? You were smiling," Naveen said. He lounged against a wooden bench as if it was a velvet-covered chair in a palace somewhere. Even in the middle of the humid bayou, he still had that regal way about him. Tiana figured it was ingrained in him. It was yet another example of how so very different they were. She wondered, even if she hadn't made a deal with that facility, Were there too many things about his world that made it so that she would never fit in it? It's nothing, she finally answered him. Just thinking back on happier times. Would those happier times include this morning? Before the insects, of course. He scooted a few inches closer to her and shimmied his shoulders. Did I impress you with my smooth dancing moves? Smooth? Her brow arched. Was I not? Tiana bit her lip to suppress her grin. You were interesting. He rubbed his chin. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I've seen some pretty interesting things that were not very impressive. Quite the opposite, in fact. She couldn't hold back her laugh any longer. Entertaining. Is that better? He wiggled his hand. Not really, but I'll take it. Makes you feel any better. I think with a little practice, you'll be dancing the Charleston be better than anyone else in New Orleans. He peered over at her, a faint light twinkling in the depths of her hazel eyes. Are you offering to be my teacher? The rich cadence in his voice sent Tiana's heart thumping triple time. She rebuffed her suggestion with a shaky laugh. Now, Naveen, you should know better than to ask that. I hardly have time to think these days with us as busy as we are down at the supper club. He murmured again. You know, I am pretty new to this having a job thing, but from what I've seen, most people take a day off every now and then, just for fun. Now that is interesting, yes? Prince Naveen, is that your way of chastising me for working too hard? Yes, he said. Is it working? No. Ah, Tiana. He pitched his head back and sighed up at the sky. With a hunch of his shoulder, he said, I tried. I know lately I've been working longer hours than some deem healthy, especially my parents, but it's an important time. I have to work hard if I want my restaurant to be a success. I understand, he murmured, leaning forward. Actually, I admire about you. Maybe you can teach me what it takes to be a success, eh? He winked. Along with how to dance the Charleston, of course. Tiana swallowed. Oh, yes. His charm was as strong as ever. This trip was going to be even more challenging than she thought.